Brilliant. So what I want to do today is look at the theory of change as a planning tool, as a tool that helps us plan our work and then for the monitoring and evaluation. We've got a PowerPoint presentation, but before we start that, I just want to ask you all, has anyone heard or completed or done a theory of change? Maybe if you had, you could put your hand up or use the chat box just to let us know if any of you have actually used a theory of change or seen one or know what it is. So Ulla has. Patricia, no. Nduku, yes. Yeah. So are most of you new to this? Yeah. Okay, so maybe we'll just go straight on onto the presentation. So Hall, you're going to put it up. Oh, great, thank you. Okay. So, theory of change for Penn International. So what it is, it's an ongoing process of reflection to explore change and how it happens. And what that means for the part we play in particular in that context. So what is it that Penn does in relation to all the other people that are also working in the same area and the same field as ourselves? So we, this is from the Comic Relief, which is a British charity. It's their definition, and I think it's a good one, although I think it means different things to different people. And as we go through, I think you'll come up with your own version of what you think a theory of change is. What I'm going to do is try and not use jargon. I'll try really hard to just use everyday English, as I think that's easier to understand. I should move on, Holly. So I think the most important thing to think about, the focus of a theory of change is on what we plan to change, not what we plan to do. So what we're saying to ourselves is not, this is what we want to do, but we actually consider what it is, what change we want to bring about because of our work. So we're looking towards that change. So in order to do that, of course, we all need a vision. And that vision is what I'm going to ask you later on. We'll have a look at some visions and how do we do a vision. So one of the things I think is really important to think about is who influences change, who are the actors. And obviously there's organizations like Facebook, which has influenced change so much in the world, or organized people, these marches and protests, changing for a better tomorrow is a good one, or individuals themselves like Malala Yousafzai. She's actually brought about change for lots of women in the world. So it's organizations, people organized together, or individuals, all influence the change that we see or comes about around ourselves and in the wider environment. What long-term and immediate factors might help or hinder our change is obviously one is the environment. If you think of some countries where you have tsunamis and things, the shock to the system, it just changes everything. There's something about social norms. It's, you know, social norms are very different in different countries, and yet within that country, behavior is an accepted way, and empathy, so bringing about change, social norms, if you behave within it, that will help your trying to bring about change. If you fight that social norm, sometimes it hinders the change happening. I know the way I always describe that is like with my children, if they do things the way I want them to do when they were small, then we all got along nicely. But the moment they started behaving badly, you change the way you as a parent deal with them, so they don't get what they want because they're demanding rather than asking. The social norm is to ask politely. And then technology can help, but of course at times it can hinder. If you can't get online and everybody's working online, or if sorry, I get these coughs. So technology again can help or hinder. Okay, Hall. So what are the medium-term changes that we want to see? These will be the objectives which we will try and measure ourselves against. If we say the vision that we have is to have a world where everyone is free to say what they like, we might have a medium change of fighting for freedom of speech in our own district. A long-term goal might be freedom of speech in our own country. So you have different levels of objectives in order to, in our theory of change. Now what we need to do is think about each of those objectives at the different levels and who will help us, what environmental things will hinder us, what will help us. We need to think those things through. And then within that, once we've got a vision, we've thought about who we're going to work with, we've thought about the goals and the objectives that we want to reach, and then we need to develop a pathway, or in some languages it would be a strategy, but within the theory of change language it's called a pathway. And then it's, what do we need to do to help freedom of speech in our district? What is our role? Who will we need to work with to achieve that role? What will we do to help make sure the environment is safe? How will we go about this? What would be our activities? And then finally, how will we measure what we've done? What would our indicators be? So at program level, theories of change can improve program design by helping us to make more appropriate choices in approach based on the context. So instead of taking approach to how you work in your own countries, instead of taking Penn International's approach, you adapt that approach to your own context. It should provoke us into thinking about new ways of supporting change. We often think we can make changes by doing the same thing over and over again, but I think sometimes we have to look back and say, well, have we made a change? Have we brought about change? And if we haven't, then we probably need to think, well, should we change ourselves in order to bring about that change that we want? It should provide us with a framework for learning and adapting, and then for assessing our impact. So have we learned from what we've done? Have we used from our interventions? And then that will help us to assess our impact. Have we made a difference? Have we brought about that change? It should help us to build a common understanding amongst those who participate. So there's something about, you'll be working with partners, peers, supporters, and other stakeholders around you, and you should together come up with a common understanding of how you're going to bring about change in the lives of the people that you want to work with. And then it should help you communicate complex programs in a powerful way. If you have a theory of change, it's much easier to see the complexity. And I know many of you are working in extraordinarily complex areas and complex countries, and your programs are complex in the way you work. And this is a really good way to communicate what it is you're doing outside. So what do they look like? Oh, there's no one answer. We at Intract, we suggest 2 to 10 pages in length with a diagram or visual picture that depicts what you're going to do, and a narrative explaining, supported with evidence. What evidence do you have that this will bring about that change? There's lots of shapes and illustrations. If you go on to the websites of organizations all over the world now, you'll see fantastic theories of change that just explain what it is the organization is about. And they need to be able to illustrate your organizational or your programmatic pathway to change, your role and what you're going to contribute, and the assumptions that you're going to make along the way. Because with everything we do, there's always assumptions, isn't there? And you need to capture those in your theory of change. These are just things that you'll get this PowerPoint, and I've popped them in there, but they're good reading on theory of change to help support what we're doing here in very quickly in a couple of hours. But I think we should get a chance to build on that, and these little papers will do that. I think you might already have had, or if not, there's a little handout I wrote as well that we'll share with you after the workshop, after this little webinar. Okay, so what I want to do is let's do a little theory of change together. Are you all up for that? Hopefully we are. Before we do the exercise, have you got any questions? Do you want to, has anybody got any questions they want to ask about the theory of change? Because of course what I've shared is a theory really. Now we need to have a go. Any questions? No?
Hello.
Hi.
Mohidin, yeah. Complicacy is there. When a political crisis is in any countries, then how it is possible to continue, then we can go theory of change if the political situation is not normal.
I think for me, that would be one of the external factors that is a negative factor, or it may be positive, of course, depending which side of the political divide you're on yourself, particularly in Bangladesh, which party you follow. When you're following one party and they're in power, you do very well, and then you follow the same party and the other party's in power, you don't do so well. So I think it's a little bit about, you have to analyze that at the time and see what you can do to mitigate against it. That's how I would see it. So yes, it's a huge issue, but it's, you would have to look at what, okay, how can we work within this negative environment that we find ourselves in at the moment.
Thank you.
Hopefully that helps. Virginia, you've put your hand up.
Yes, I always find that I'm not quite sure whether at times we tend to forget change. I think needs a lot of people, and a lot of the majority of the people are ordinary people, the downtrodden, who actually would help to bring change. But the problem becomes the use of language, and I would insist that I think using local languages also will be another strategy. Would that be in order? Because normally we use English and it's limited to communities, and the majority of the people really need these changes use local languages. I don't know if that's in order.
No, I think it's essential that you use. I personally agree that you should never do a theory of change in somebody else's language. I totally agree. I think what often happens is you have to share your theory of change with the donors, and then of course they want it in English, or you have to share it with Penn International and they need it in English. But that's fine. You can do your theory of change in local language and then just translate and send the translated copy to whoever's external. But for yourselves, I totally agree. I think you can't think about the environment and change and how you bring about change without working in the language of the change that you want to bring about. So I totally agree. 100% with you. Yes, it should be in your own language and translate it for the donor or for Penn International or whoever. Is that okay, Holly? Did I say that right? Good.
Well, yes, I do appreciate. Thank you so much.
That's okay.
Makes life easier. Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you.
And really, the little handout that I wrote is only 2 pages, so you probably will have to translate that into a local language to help you. But it's very short. I've done it as simply as I
Normally
can.
we do that. Yes, for accessibility we do with translators. Thank you.
Good. Excellent. Excellent. You're all writers, so you're probably better than me at it. Any other questions? No. Okay, let's have a go. Let's do a theory of change. I've come up with a vision or a problem, sorry, not a vision, which Holly will stick up on the screen for us so we can all see it.
Okay.
I think Holly's written it into the text box as well. What I was thinking was really you need to identify what's the problem, what is it you want to change. And I came up with this one. I think we're all having problems of communication during the current pandemic. How can we bring about change and improve our communication? Okay, so what I'd like you all to do first off is to come up with a vision of if the communication problems are not there, if there were no communication problems, what would your vision be around communication at this moment? If we were looking at, you know, the next pandemic, which hope never comes, but if it does, how would we have solved these communication problems? What would be your vision in terms of there is no communication problems across the world? We can improve it. What would be your vision of that? I'll give you all a few minutes to think about a vision. But if communication was not a problem. In the chat box. Okay, Patricia's asked me to rephrase it. What I'm trying to do is, at the moment, we're all having to work through the internet. And there does appear to be quite a few problems with that, in that some people don't have sound, some people, the internet goes down at a regular basis, or people's sound is not quite right. So what I'm trying to say is that if all those things were solved, if there was no problems with communication, what would it look like? How would we all be communicating? Does that help, Patricia? get it. Great. So, has anyone come up with a vision? Holly, do you have a vision? So Mo from Myanmar is saying that the vision would be having information oriented, everything would be very easy, and more activities. We could do more activities because our information flows were much more easy. Hi Musa, welcome. Is there anyone else? More participation, Patricia is saying. More contribution and a higher number of participants. Which participants would that be, Patricia? Okay. So Mu'eddin has talked about exchanging info through Facebook page and email. Ketley, an idea would be to try and find topics of specific interest to people, like giving them things they need in this moment. Is that instead of doing this exercise, Ketley? So from i.e. a global interconnected network for passionate people across the country and our region, being maybe 10 at an event, but 10,000 through the internet, regardless of geographic limitations. That's a lovely vision, yes. Ketley, what I was asking was your question, is that we should find a different topic for this exercise, or is that in general? I wasn't sure what your question was for a vision. Your idea is could be to try and find topics of specific interest to the people, like giving them things they need at this moment. What I was asking, is that your vision if communication was better? Yeah, so Mu'eddin said in the current pandemic, social media is one of the best medium to communicate. So how do we improve? What would be your vision of improved social media? Okay, Ketley, so yes, I see what you mean. Yes, you're right. That's a good vision. So you're actually saying during pandemic at Penn, Haiti, we proposed to the internauts to try to write poetry every day. They participated, and this brought attention to us and other things we had to share with them. So your vision would be that you would have more attention, and that you would have more things to share. So the vision would be, in the future, there would be more attention to us as an organisation and other things we have to share to bring more attention. You're saying we try to have some activities to be done through online, for example, workshop, training, course, poetry, performing. But although that's what you try to do, the activities, what I'm trying to get you to think about is, if you had no problem with communication, what would the vision be, Jorn? How would you see it in the future if there was no communication problems? I think Virginia, it's true, there'd be more participation. So we could have increased participation would be part of our vision. A bigger reach and engaging the audience, Katrina's saying. So all of you are looking for a wider audience, I think. So if we had no communication problems, we'd have a much wider audience. What else would we have? A bigger reach.
We cannot gathering, so the communication is very big problem. So yeah. Even writers or school or like the big crowd, so we stay home. So we feel like so lonely. So we try to find a way that we can move forward to work together. For writers in Cambodia, like the freedom of expression is also very limited.
Yeah.
For talking about the virus. So that bring us very feel so scared about for expression about the problem, like last month. One of commentator has been arrested for criticize the government. So we have more and more problem for the same time, pandemic, freedom of expression, and economic problem. So this is big changing for this time.
So if I asked you to think about a vision, I would suspect your vision would be that you had improved communication and that loneliness was reduced and that people could talk freely throughout Cambodia. That would be your vision, that everyone had freedom of speech, everybody was connected enough to stop their loneliness, and the communication would be much easier across the whole country. Would that be your vision for the future?
Yes, for our vision for the next future, we want to build a good channel for our community, for our writer, that can bring up the idea through social media, or they can communicate online for their safety, for health safety, for security, with the freedom of their expression. So we find the best way for the first time for safety both, because we are so scared for express our freedom in here, and we also very afraid of COVID-19 like at the same time. So I think Cambodia very like big problem with freedom of expression a few years so far because of the big opposition party has been shut down, like civil society, some of the organization uh, has been shut down, like Free Asia Radio has been shut down in Cambodia, and Delhi, Cambodia has been shut down by the government as well. So I try to be I need quiet for a long time in Penn in Cambodia, just like a big storm. So we cannot stand up at the time that we have a big storm. So we have to bow down until everything finished. So including the pandemic of COVID-19. So the vision of our center, we have to find a way that to protect our safety, our writers' safety, safety for their freedom of expression, safety for health security, and safety for their like income for the, because they don't have any more work so far. Some of them, yeah. That's what we can say and what we can, what we imagine what we can do for the next future for the writers in Cambodia.
So really, you've come up with a vision that is that within Cambodia, we would like freedom of expression and involvement for civil society, and that so that communications can increase online to improve health security and reduce fear from COVID-19. Yes, that's your vision of the future. Yeah. So if we all took that as our vision, if we just say everybody, that's our vision, we're all working together, what we then need to do is look at the actors. We would have to think about the people who would help us to do that. Who would be the positive actors that would help us to do that? And who would be the negative actors that would help us to do that? So we think about, we're going to change the communication, we're going to have freedom of expression, we want a good channel, we want to be a good channel ourselves for that communication. We want to improve the health, the mental health, the health, security, and reduced fear. So who would be the people that would help you do that within each of your own countries? Because I suspect you're all facing the same sorts of things. You might word it slightly differently, but I suspect they'll be the same. Who are the people that would help you with that? Who could you work alongside to help you? Which organizations, which people that you know now would help you in that vision, in achieving that vision?
So in Cambodia, we have some like organization like Licado, the most active for helping the freedom of expression mostly, but so far they feel also scared, so fear with like the activity of the government for very limited. Even sometimes people writing something on the social media, especially on Facebook, has been arrested. Like a few months ago, people criticize government for very late for activity to protect the COVID-19. So he writes something on the Facebook, so he has been arrested. So so I think for Cambodian people so far, for the organization or someone who would like stand very strong to protect the freedom of expression, not like not very strong like before, because many civil organizations who protect the freedom of expression has been moved out. Some of them, like the Center of Democracy, sponsored by U.S. government, has been moved out, shut down by the government. Like the mass destruction of the civil society, like the government had shut down the biggest government, biggest opposition party, CNRP. Government shut down Cambodia Daily English newspaper, shut down in 2017. Radio Free Asia also shut down in Cambodia, and a lot of things that the government shut down. Mostly the civil voice who protect the people for freedom of expression. So our like Penn president has moved out during 1916, like the 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 most famous commentator Kamlay has been killed in 2016. So in Cambodia, like the people who stand for strong for protect the freedom of expression has been killed and arrested. So so we so far we don't have someone who help us for protecting us. We try to protect ourselves. we cannot depend on anyone so far.
Okay, brilliant. So one of the things you've just talked about is strong civil society organizations would be somebody you worked with closely, yes? They would be your positive.
We don't have anyone to work with, just like we have, we don't want to like to stand face to face with the government because we are so small organization. We
Okay.
we are try to be flexible. We try to be politely.
Yeah, of course,
Yeah,
of course. What we're doing at the moment, we're not thinking about how we work with the actors and factors, but who are the actors that would work with us and who are the actors who would work against us, and what factors would help us and what factors would be against us. So what you've talked about, just Jorn, is the government is an actor that probably is working against freedom of speech at the moment. The factors are that people have fear. It's those things that would be on the negative side. On the positive side, maybe other active CSOs you could work closely with to help you to deal with this problem. Because if our vision is that we want to have a freedom of expression across Cambodia, then we have to think about how are we going to do that. And so who is going to help us and who is probably going to be a problem for us, yeah? So, and some other people have come up. I think we've got Ministry of Health came from, I'm going to check who. From Wesi, was it? Yeah, could work with the Ministry of Health and the media. That's good. So who else could you work with to help with this changing Cambodian so that there is freedom of expression and the involvement of society so that communications can increase online to improve health, security and reduce fear? Any other?
Do you mean who that can help us
Yeah.
protecting us for freedom of expression?
Yep.
Yeah. Before we have a lot of like the organization like who have like opposition party, also one of the active for helping people express their freedom. Ricardo, one of the biggest organization for protecting the freedom of expression, and also like but so far the government not allow those organizations to.
Yeah, don't worry about it so far, but we know it's opposition parties might help you. Don't think about you've tried so far. Just think about who they are. That's what we're trying to.
I think Ricardo. I think.
Ricardo.
Ricardo. Yeah.
Is that a person?
Ricardo is
or an organization?
I will send you the link for the.
Okay. And Patricia's come up with lawyers who are crucial to defend us when our freedom. So that's good. You'll be working with lawyers. Thank you, Patricia. So it's about, yeah, so the framework, the positive factor would be a good legal framework would help, wouldn't it? Yeah, brilliant. Any other thoughts on the positive actors or factors or negative actors or factors that you have?
Well,
Who's good? Yeah, Virginia.
yes, I would actually think that increasing the number of women, either organizations or ordinary women, will have a very positive, because women push things and to be encouraged. We encourage the women not to be afraid because it's for the good of everybody else, because women are always affected by all sorts of things. To encourage them, to push them, to support them. And actually, if you increase the number of, I'm not being a sexist, but I think things move when we increase the number of women.
Okay.
It proves something, because we've gone through certain areas where we've increased the number of women and things move.
So you'll work with women's organizations and individual women as well, I suspect.
Yes, we include them. Of course, there are those who do not want to be part of organizations, but we mobilize all women, and a big number of women actually are so powerful that things can change in a positive direction.
Absolutely. I agree, they do. Social medias. Oh, yeah, God, social media. That's an excellent. Mo, I think that's a brilliant one. The social media is definitely a negative. I agree. It could be made a positive, but I think generally it is quite a negative. Yes, hate speech and trolling is all part of that, isn't it? You're right. Human rights organizations, of course, and I think maybe whichever country you're in, it's human rights organizations both nationally and internationally. There's two types, and I think sometimes it's an international human rights organization can help you in fighting government, particularly if you're in a position like Lorne where the government is very oppressive. Sometimes the protection comes from being linked with international organizations. So I think international and local human rights organizations would be positive and we could work with. Any other factors? We've got the legal framework, it is a positive factor. What other positive factors would help with this vision?
Okay, I would like to add something. Hello, yeah. I would like to add something that's to improve the communication, we can have some plan. That maybe there are long-term goals, medium-term goals, short-term goals, and immediate problems. When there is any immediate problem, then we can think about that. And the social media, and beside the social media, we can communicate each other in the groups and the social organizations here in the same countries. We can communicate with our district to district, different districts, local, rural levels also, urban levels. And we can communicate with local writers, to communicate with the center Penn organizations. Then we can communicate. Actually, I think we have to have the long-term plans, short-term plans, and medium-term plans, and we have to go according to the plan.
Absolutely. And what we're trying to do is think about, before we have the plan, we're trying to think about who would be involved in our plan? Who are the negatives people or the negative factors in our plan? What are the positive factors and actors? One that I think that has changed quite a lot is WhatsApp. I know we talk about social media being a negative, but the WhatsApp, I've noticed, has increased communication across the world. I mean, I belong to so many WhatsApp groups now, and it definitely has worked. It's a positive factor that we now can communicate with groups of people at the same time. So I think that's a good positive factor, which I'm sure you use in Bangladesh a lot.
Yeah.
Any other? Some of these, when we talk about negative actors and positive actors, of course, they could be both. So you could find the opposition party as a negative party, or it could be negative to helping, or it could be positive to helping. So you have to be able to assess within your own environment, within your own context, which of these would be positive and which would be negative actors and factors. So now the next stage, and we could go on for a lot longer, but of course we have a shorter webinar, is to say that we should map out these actors and factors to think about which ones we will work with and then how we're going to work with them. That's what we would do next after doing this exercise. So if I suggested that, the suggestion I think from Wesley, sorry, was Ministry of Health. Wesley, how would you work with the Ministry of Health as a positive actor in helping to increase the freedom of expression? I love Danson's comment. He's absolutely right. Organizations doing something similar to what we do, sometimes we think of them as rivals, but most of the time it's because we do not engage with them. If we design ways of working together, those organizations will help us to swim better and faster. That's brilliant, Simile. That's exactly what I'm asking you to do now. So thinking about the partner organizations or strong civil society organizations, we would actually start to build relationships with them. So the start of our activities within our plan, within our theory of change, would be to look at those people and start building relationships with organizations that think the same way as we do. I think that's right, Wesley, that service providers can be both positive and negative. So we need to know or assess, we need to do a context analysis of who are the positive ones, who are the positive actors that we can work with. So that's interesting. In Malawi, there's been a campaign against exorbitant data costs. It's very expensive. So in this case, our service providers could act as a negative actor. Exactly. That's one thing with communication. We don't have it here, but of course the internet is a huge factor, isn't it, with communication? Now, it's a positive. Today it's very positive. We're all talking to each other through the internet, but it can be a negative if you can't afford to pay to have the internet. I know I work with lots of small organizations around the world where the internet, that's why WhatsApp has become, I think, so valuable, is because it's much cheaper than the internet in some countries. So service providers can be, as you say, positive and negative. Okay, so is everyone happy they understand that process of we need to do a context analysis around the actors and factors that will be negative and positive in order to think about how we're going to work with them. And I'm not going to go through the whole exercise. It would take, normally you would do this in half a day. You would literally think about your vision and then start looking at who and what will influence the work that you do. So if we just very quickly say you would work with other civil society organizations, you would possibly work with government. I know Jorn might say it's too difficult, but some of you would be able to work with your government. You definitely would be able to work with lawyers. You'll be able to use WhatsApp. You can use the internet, but you may have to advocate against the cost of internet. You may have to actually see that as a positive in working with the internet, using the internet, but the negative factor or the factor that's against is actually the cost, and you may have to be advocating for a reduction in cost in the internet. Might be part of your work. Any other thoughts on the positive or negatives, or how you would work with some of these actors or factors? So already, as Wesley said, in Malawi, there's been a campaign against exorbitant data costs, which is very expensive. The service providers could act as a negative actor. Ministry of Health could come in as a positive actor. We could find means of working with them together to disseminate health messages to as many people as possible. Brilliant. That would be a good way of working with people. Working with the Ministry of Health will be to get health messages out there, particularly at the moment about COVID-19, which is what you're trying to reduce, is that fear of COVID-19, because it is huge fear for many people. Here in the UK, many people have not sent their children back to school because they're still afraid that their children will get COVID-19. Even though schools have opened, parents are still scared, and we need to get messages across that children are safe in schools. So I think those things are important. Danson, it's fine. Bye. Okay. So when we think about the barriers, we also have to think about the risks. So when we start to map this out in a context, one of the risks is that the Ministry of Health would be willing to work with us, or that the internet providers, a risk might be the internet providers actually could increase the costs. That's a huge risk. Or that the government could decide that WhatsApp, it's not going to allow that to be in our country anymore because it gives too much freedom of speech. I think the same as Abdullah Sila, he's saying education system can be both positive and negative factor. In what way would it be both positive and negative? So Holly's started to pop some risks in. So costs, internet costs could be increased or reduced. So the risk is that it could be, we're working towards trying to reduce it, but actually it could increase because we annoy the internet people, who knows?
If I could step in for the internet factor. In Myanmar, the internet during this pandemic, internet factor has been a very positive view because of these trainings, and also the government is using it very wisely and very productively for sharing information, for case study of on COVID positive cases, or any other lecture for school. They are even starting to start a program on both school syllabus to air on television, through television, so that maximum students can reach out to the uh, uh, to education systems. And also these trainings and workshop have been so productive in government itself, that they are also giving these trainings, and most of the trainings and are also provided by the government to the civilians people. So in Myanmar it has been come up as a positive factor. Thank you.
Which is something that you now in Myanmar can build on, because it's such a positive factor. When you're looking at freedom of expression, maybe you can build on what's already being done through the internet. So there's a positive that can help you think about developing a strategy or a pathway of how you will work with the internet. Yeah.
Although if we talk about a barrier, there are some geographical places that the internet and phone connection have not been able to very easily accessible to people. But they are also trying as much as the service providers are trying much harder now to give internet access and phone stable areas to the most geographical focuses. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. So actually, as an organization, you could be looking at how you communicate in the areas where the barrier is there, that they still don't have enough internet coverage. So you would be thinking about a strategy or a pathway for how you could get your messages out there.
Yes. Can
Yeah.
I say something as well on the?
Yeah.
We just got our data bundles increased on the 31st, and that's a disadvantage. And this is also related to our economic situation in Zimbabwe, where really, even if we try to negotiate with the service provider, especially the bigger ones, I do not think so. That is also a negative for us. Of course, we have to try and negotiate, but we're not the only ones. It's very difficult. I can see more and more people losing an opportunity of communication.
Okay, so actually, the way that your pathway, if it's difficult to negotiate directly with the internet providers yourself, what you might want to do is create a movement of people that becomes bigger. So other organizations who are having the same problem as yourself, you start to work with them, individuals, as you say yourself, women who come together and start to lobby against the internet providers. So that would be one of your pathways of change for freedom of speech, would be we're going to work with other women, with other organizations who are having the same problem with the internet, and together we will advocate or lobby to change the way the internet is being provided. Yeah?
Yes, thank you so much, because I think they've gone, I think it's less than a month now, or is it a month? It went up again, and no one has actually protested or said anything. I think people are so powerless in such a way that they don't think about negotiating anymore. Thank you so much for that idea. I'll take it up. Thank you.
And I think that powerlessness is about being alone, and as Jorn says, about fear. But if we work together, then we become stronger, don't we? So in a way, the strength of, or your pathway would be working together and building a network, not only of Penn people, but other organizations, as Danson said, and other ways of working together, other people that think the same way as you, maybe even opposition party members from the government who also think the internet should be more accessible. So it's about building a movement who are fighting for that, which you could do from Penn very easily. So that would be your strategy towards, or one of your pathways towards dealing with that vision.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Good.
Thank you.
They're your ideas, not mine, honestly, all of you. I mean, this is a lot of work you've just done. It's impressive, really. Do you agree, Holly? Yeah, thumbs up. It's interesting that AO is saying that you have more gatherings during this period. And are those gatherings work-related gatherings or private-related gatherings?
Well, they are more about, any activity, conference or workshop that we will do, normally physically, which would take a lot of work, a lot of space, to find a venue and all. People just get online and we do it. So we have much more conferences and public speaking that just went on during this whole period, and at some point you were kind of exhausted because it was much more things that we would do normally. For example, usually Saturday in Togo, the days where we go to these kind of events, and some days you can have 4 or 5 meetings in the same day. So yeah, so basically it was more about organization that are doing their activities. Everything went online for some time, and it's I don't know if this will stick in the months to come, because you need people to get online, and in my country it can be complicated because of high cost for internet. So, but I do think this will be a big foundation for the days for the period to come, to make much more activities online.
You're right. I think for all of us, I think, for me as a consultant who works with monitoring and evaluation, I do lots of my evaluations by traveling to other countries. But in the last 6 months since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, I've done more and more evaluations online. Well, in the future, maybe we should be building on that now, so that we're not flying all over the world and wasting money on foreigners flying in, but that if you want the external view, you can do it online. I think it's true. There's so many things that have been improved because of the COVID-19, we need to build on those. And I think you're right. It's a good medium, social media, as well as the internet and WhatsApp and all the other tools. Zoom is a brilliant one. I mean, Zoom has probably become the richest organization in the world next to Google. Just everybody is on Zoom now. That's the way it is. I think these things, they will change the way we are. And I feel that if the vision of freedom of expression exists in Cambodia, and increased involvement for society so that communications can increase, maybe the COVID-19 has been a good start for all of that. It's been dreadful for the health side, but maybe for communication side, it's actually created a positive move forward. Okay, so the next step would be to think about, and that's what we've been doing now, is to think about our pathways. So one of our pathways would be to come together, groups of people, groups of organizations, groups of women, to maybe try and deal with the negative side of the internet. Maybe the same with social media, although I do feel social media is a difficult one. Maybe some of you have better ideas than I would have on how you deal with the negative side of social media. Very difficult. Okay. So what I think we're going to do now, Holly, if I'm right, maybe you could come in, is we've kind of done a sort of almost a context analysis on how we're going to deal with freedom of expression in Cambodia. What I suspect will be quite good now is for you to have a little go in thinking about your own countries and your own where you're working and the issues, the actors and factors that would stop you reaching your visions.
Is the plan to do that in groups, Anne?
Well, do people want to do it in groups, or would they rather do it on their own? Maybe that's the question we should ask all of you. Because what I really think is, if we had some time now to think about this in our own context, do you think it would be better in small groups helping each other?
We've got an absolutely from Renault.
Yes. Okay. So Holly, do we have groups set up?
No, but we can set some up, and then maybe just
Can I?
minutes.
I will set them up.
Thanks, Alwa. So what I'd like you to do in your groups is maybe as a group come up with a vision that you would like to see for the future in all your countries together, whichever group you're in, and then do the little exercise of who would we work with, who are the actors that would help us, who are the actors we would have to work towards changing, we would have to bring about change, who are the what are the factors within our countries that we would have to, a lot of them I suspect will be the same as the ones we've just done, but you'll have specific ones. And then think about what pathways, what objectives. If you remember, Muhyiddin said earlier, we need to have objectives, or long-term objectives and short-term and medium-term objectives, what you would be doing. One of the ones that has come up from Virginia's suggestions is that actually we'll get groups of, one of the activities we will do, or one of the objectives is we want to have groups of people working together to deal with this issue, to actually come together, and as a group we can change the way the internet providers work. So that's what we'll work towards, and that's a pathway, and that pathway would have a long-term objective, a medium-term objective, maybe a short-term objective, and then some activities. How are we going to go about that? And then from that would come your budget and all the things that normally come after you've decided your objectives of what you're going to do. So if you think about it in your heads, I'm just doing this while the groups are being set up, but think about it in your heads that instead of thinking these are the activities we want to do, what we're going to do, or what you're going to do, is think about what's our vision of change, what is it we want to change, who are the negative actors and the positive actors, who are the positive, and who are the negative, what are the negative factors and actors, what are the assumptions we're making around all of this. And then what you start to do is to look at who are we going to work with, who are we going to lobby, who are we going to advocate, what changes do we think we can bring about because we do that. And then eventually, because you've got the objectives, you'll actually come down to what are the activities we're going to do in order to bring about these changes. What we often do when we're planning projects, we tend to start with what are we going to do. What I'm asking you to do is think about what are we going to change. And if you think about what it is you want to change, that's why it's called a theory of change. What is it you want to change? And then what you want to do doesn't come until after you've made the decisions about who will help you change, who will be a problem that you'll have to deal with in order to bring about that change, who should we work with, who should we try and change or try and work with, who should we be lobbying, who should we be in opposition to, what are the assumptions around that, and then eventually what activities, what objectives we want to reach, what change we want to make at different levels, and then what activities eventually will be at the end of the line, not the beginning of the line. Is that clear? Does it help? Just changing the way we think a little bit. So shall we look at each group, just a little feedback on how the exercise went in your groups. So group one, Holly, do you have the numbers, or Salwa?
Maria.
Or Maria. Oh, I'll get it right in the end. Maria.
Yes, yeah, in room 1 was Virginia, Nduko, Maura, Ketli, someone called iPhone, I don't know who it is, Danson, and CM.
Okay, so would one of you like to feed back? No.
Yes, I'm the one who will speak for group 1.
Thanks, Ketley. You're a star.
Shall I go on?
Please do.
Yes, so my first share with the group was that I had a feeling that while we were talking as a whole group, the feeling of that as Penn centers, our interests were scattered too much into too many fields, because basically I consider myself as an association of writers. Writing, words, journalism, media is our tool. So although literature is intimately mixed with politics, but this is not our main issue. Our main issue is mastering the word so that we can become vocal and a pressure group eventually. But basically, we need to, as far as myself is concerned in Haiti, nurture the young writers, specifically the women, the young girls, the young women, to have to become concerned citizens that have a say in what is going on in the political field, and accompany them in that nurturing by giving them webinars, workshops into writing, building up their consciousness as citizens. This is our mission in Haiti. And that's why we use the media to contact more people, to give them an idea of how powerful the word can be in a society, how people can look up to you when you master that word properly. So, but to do so, and I myself, I've had so many problems catching the interest of people. People are lost in their day-to-day problems, in the political situation so very heavy in Haiti, where we are seeing a dictatorship gradually installing into the community. I was saying that like 3-4 days ago, the assassination of the president of the Bar of Lawyers really was a heavy blow on the society. But still, we think that forming people to become more vocal and more strong in their way of thinking, in their and becoming a group of pressure can help a lot. And literature is, to me, in Haiti, one of the last 10 where we can have a resistance, because taking to the street is becoming very, very much dangerous. So to do that, we need to associate with people with the same interest. And as someone put earlier in the meeting, sometimes we see them as rivals. Sometimes we see them as people who want all the light on them and, you know, look down to us, but this is not true. From a dialogue, you realize that those people were looking for the same thing as you do. So it's to make an effort to go towards them and build something where we can be helpful to one another. And of course, social media, again, is actually the best mean to do so. And basically, that is what we talked about in our group.
Brilliant. It's interesting because the most important thing you probably came out with was this importance of context, that how different every Penn Centre is. And in the group I was in, it was about when we talk about the vision, or we talk about what was within the vision, we have to define what we mean by it in each country, because it could be very different. You're right. So that's an important lesson to all of us, that we have to be, the theory of change or any planning process must be done within the context of the country you're in, not brought in from outside. So I think that's really important.
Yes, yes.
Good. Group 2? Who is group 2?
Katrina, Holly, Mo, Mr. Musa, Negin, Sal, Toyin, and John. So if any one of you want to give some feedback.
Group 2, somebody presenting?
Hi, Mo, there you are. We didn't actually decide who would be giving the feedback, so maybe we can both. I'll just quickly say a few things, and Mo, if you'd like to add something, then you're welcome to do that. I think what came out clearly in our discussion was that something like social media can be a massive positive, but then also a massive negative as well. So as a point of departure, Mo mentioned that greater access would be in her vision. And in Myanmar, you would have areas where people don't have access to internet, don't have access to social media platforms. So there, we would need to engage, like we mentioned last time, service providers and other role players to try to correct that and get the necessary access. But then once, or say we have tackled that challenge and now people have access, we also spoke about what we can do and what can change in order to have social media spaces not be hostile communication spaces, but places of constructive feedback and communication. So we spoke a bit about how people are being bullied and intimidated on social media and how hate speech can be a big problem, and who we can engage to try to tackle those issues. So we spoke about other organizations, women organizations, the importance of having a legal framework to address hate speech. Let me see whether I noted something else. Oh, Mo, you also mentioned the emotional support. So say someone has been subjected to abuse online, partnering with organizations or people who can provide emotional support to ensure that maybe the young woman who is a writer and who is now being abused online will actually continue writing and not to have that emotional support to bounce back from experience like that. Mo, I don't know whether you'd like to add something else.
So also from Tanyan, she said her vision would be to have uninterrupted freedom of expression by mobilizing civil groups or the youths to express their ideology. As we know, the opposing majority, the government, might discourage this from happening. However, we should utilize our expertise to push our vision to reality by being unrelenting. Involving the women's group would also go a long way. It is from Tonyan. Thanks so much for that. And also, I feel that we have actually started these small goals to achieve that vision by doing these webinars through Penn International for engaging and giving out these theories on webinars on the topics and ideas that we are exploring today in this webinar. So yeah, I'd like to add this, and thank you very much for doing that. So.
Thank you, Penn. It's been like that, Holly. Great, thank you, Mo. Thank you both. I think, the session has come out is about who you work with, and there's lots of things like the social, the emotional support is just as important as the physical support. And great, lovely, thank you. Group 3. I know I was in that group, so who would like to feed back from that group?
In group 3, we came up with a different vision, which was increasing center visibility through civil society programs. We did not do much, but we looked at the factors and actors, which were government. We looked at it in both ways. It can be a hindrance, and it can also facilitate progress in the programs that we do, depending on the policies that they come up with. And also the media as another factor, both positive and negative, depending with what they decide to publish about the programs that we'll do. It will either tarnish the Penn image or actually say something positive about the Penn Center. Other actors and factors that we looked at were artists, cultural norms, community participation, how willing is the community that we're working with, how willing is it to work with us? Are they expecting something unrealistic from us? Those questions were asked. And different organizations, women organizations and whatnot. We also listed Penn International as one of the actors. And now towards the end, there was a question as to what visibility means. And this gave us an eye-opener, that it was an eye-opener to us that there is need to have a clear vision.
Yeah.
We should not leave room for questions as to, okay, what does this mean? What do they want to mean? What do they want to say? A vision has to be as clear as possible. Yes, thank you, Anne. I'm not sure if I've forgotten anything.
No, that's brilliant feedback. And I think the important point is that as within the group, the question was about, as you say, the vision, that actually the vision has to be absolutely clear so that people can't question, well, what do you mean by visibility? We have to actually define exactly what we mean within the vision. So yeah, it was a really interesting group. Thank you. Is there a group 4? I don't know how many groups there were.
Only 3. That's it.
3. Okay, and it's 1 o'clock. Oh, we've done it. Drum roll. Thank you, everybody. You will get a recording of this, and we'll send the little paper I wrote on theory of change, which might help you. Hopefully you'll have a think about it and go back to your centres and just try to think through how you're going to develop your theories of change. How are you going to bring about change in your Penn Centre, in your country? And this is just a little taster to how you might be able to go about doing that. So thank you all.